It's become very trendy for people in sort of the online, be like the right wing kind of truther, schizo space to identify themselves as an autist, as autistic, that they are neurodivergent, whether ironically or seriously. And a lot of people do seriously believe that they're neurodivergent. And I'm an example of that because for a long time, up until pretty recently, I genuinely believed that I had some kind of autism, that I had some kind of neurodivergence, which made me different from the average person, from the average neurotypical person. I think that's a common sentiment with people in this space that we occupy. A lot of people come to this conclusion because, well, we are different from the average person. I mean, I know that I don't really think like the average person. I'm certainly not going to say I'm entirely different from the average person, but I would say that just from a young age, I had an intuition about the world that a lot of people didn't have back then and don't do now. And I think that's the same for most of you, if not all of you watching this, that there's something about your brain that has some sort of intuition. It has some sort of higher cognitive ability than the average person. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have come to the conclusion that maybe we are neurodivergent, maybe we are autistic, maybe we have Asperger's. We have something about us that makes it harder for us to accept social norms. Now, the thing is, though, is that I do not think that you need to understand social norms to be neurotypical. And I think it makes more sense when you actually observe people who are genuinely autistic, people who you can tell right away that this person is autistic. This person is an actual neurodivergent person. I could give an example like Chris Chan or Daniel Larson or World of T-Shirts. People like that, these locals, these are people that are definitely 100% autistic, and you know right away that these people are neurodivergent. And what makes these people neurodivergent is that they literally cannot perceive social norms. I have this problem where I will often blurt things out that aren't socially acceptable. And the thing is, I realize that they aren't socially acceptable after I say them. And for a long time, I just assumed, oh, I must have some mild Asperger's or something, and that's why I can't seem to pick up on what is acceptable to say in a certain situation. However, then I realized that, hey, I actually do know what is socially acceptable because the very fact that I can acknowledge that that thing I said was not socially acceptable right away indicates that I do have social awareness. I can say something, then observe how that person reacts to it. I can see their facial features change. I can determine from their facial features, from the way they're talking, what they actually think about what I just said and what they think about me. Now, a real neurodivergent person, a real autistic person, doesn't have that part of their brain where they can even read social cues. A real neurodivergent person doesn't even think that there's anything wrong with them. They do not self-reflect. Yes, you can tell an autistic person that they're autistic, and they can kind of understand that maybe they do things that aren't socially acceptable, but they will never figure that out on its own. For example, Chris Chan. Chris Chan thinks he's a normal person. And sure, he's acknowledged that he's autistic, but he doesn't actually realize the things he does are incredibly off-putting to people. He doesn't realize that everyone around him thinks he's disgusting and weird and gross. That never occurs to him. And that is real neurodivergence. Real neurodivergence is being fully incapable of perceiving that your behavior is actually off-putting to other people. Real neurodivergent people do not self-reflect. Real neurodivergent people don't see anything wrong with their behavior. And in a lot of cases, real neurodivergent people don't care what other people think about them. They don't care about how their behavior affects other people. And I'm not saying that like it's a virtue. I'm just saying that there are a lot of real autistic people out there who just do not care about people. They don't care about anything, really. They're just very self-focused. And they don't care if what they're doing is off-putting to other people. Even if they realize it somehow, even if you can convince them, they might just not care. And that's what separates a real neurodivergent person from people who claim that they are neurodivergent. I am not ND because I care what people think about me to an extent. Obviously, I'm not a pushover and I voice my opinion, but I care what my family, I care what my friends thinks about me, and I care about if I'm fucked up a social situation that I don't want to. For example, if I'm talking to a girl, or if I'm trying to make a good impression during a business deal or something, anything like that. The fact that I can self-reflect and realize that maybe I said something that wasn't socially acceptable, and the fact that I can sense that what I said wasn't socially acceptable, tells me that I am just a normal person. I am a neurotypical person, and most of you watching are probably neurotypical. So how did we end up the way we did? Now, there's a few reasons for why that is. Now, one is simply that not everyone is the same. Sure, there is sort of a baseline that the majority follow, but the reality is that everyone's brain chemistry is different, and there are so many minute factors that are going to influence how you develop socially. And then there's also IQ. IQ is a big factor. Obviously, people with higher IQs, I would argue, are naturally going to be more independent thinkers. I mean, I would say that I have a above average IQ. I don't know exactly what it is, but my parents both had IQ tests, and they both scored well above average, and IQ is genetic, so naturally, I would assume that I have an above average IQ. I'm not going to say I'm a super genius, but I do grasp a lot of concepts that are harder for the average person to understand. And it's probably the same with most of you watching this. You just have a genetic predisposition to be able to think outside the box, to be able to grasp certain concepts. There's also what I would call the failed normie. And I think that a lot of us, including myself to an extent, we are failed normies. We are failed extroverts. Now, a lot of people, including myself, love to identify as introverts, and I said for a long time that I was an introvert. Now, the more I think about it, the more I have come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as an introvert. For example, let's say that growing up, you didn't have a very healthy relationship with your parents. Maybe they didn't raise you right. Maybe they didn't help to develop your self-esteem. And maybe you aren't very good looking. Maybe you're overweight. So you're a bit more off-putting to people just through your physical appearance. So let's say that you are physically unattractive and you don't have self-esteem because of whatever reason. Maybe you just had bad parents or some other factor of your upbringing. So now you are going into social situations. You are going to get a negative reaction from people. Maybe because of your appearance, maybe because you lack confidence and people can sense that you're not very confident, and because of that, they don't respect you. I mean, hey, children are nasty. Children are brutal. They're mean. So you had that bad experience with socializing. So now you are developing a negative feedback loop with socializing. So now you are going to be more insular because you have that negative experience. You're going to be more scared to socialize. You're going to be more introverted. In the past, I don't think it was as big of an issue because even people who struggled socializing, inevitably, I think they would learn to overcome it. Most people, simply because there was no other option. However, in modern times, we have the internet, we have video games, and a lot of kids that struggle socially end up turning to video games or to the internet as a coping mechanism. When you play these video games, when you go on the internet, you do not feel that social pressure. You can live in this virtual reality and not feel any rejection. So now it's going to create a self-fulfilling cycle where because you were afraid to interact with people or you had negative experience, you're now going to go onto the internet. You're going to probably spend a large chunk of your childhood on the internet, on social media, on video games. So now your social skills are going to get even worse because you're not developing them. And you're basically not going to be able to pick up on social cues as easily as the average person. You're going to become autistic in a way. And this is where I think a lot of autism actually comes from. It's not even from birth. It literally is being caused by the internet because people are becoming more insular. They are turning online to cope with, like I said, this negative feedback loop they might have experienced from socializing. And now they're never going to actually properly socialize because they aren't interacting with the real world anymore. They're living in their own world with its own social norms, with its own rules, and you're simply not going to know how to interact with other people. You're not going to understand the rules. You're not going to understand the norms. So you're literally going to become autistic in a way. And I think this is honestly the majority of young people. I would say the majority of Gen Z to some extent has been inflicted by this digital autism. I mean, even the popular kids today are just not even functioning on a normal level. Like everyone today is so socially awkward and just so socially inept. So it's a universal thing. Majority of people have not developed the way they're supposed to. And I think this is why Gen Z as a whole is a very depressed generation. I think we have a very doomeristic mentality. And it's because deep down, most of us realize that we did not have normal childhoods. I mean, I think that's why we have so much nostalgia for older generations. It's because we know that we didn't have normal, proper development. We didn't socialize properly. We didn't have a real childhood. I think that Gen Z is never really going to be able to overcome this problem that we have. And I think the way that we look at millennials as super cringy man children, at least that's kind of the stereotype. The stereotype for Gen Z is going to be the unfulfilled doomer, the self-identified neurodivergent, and younger generations are going to look at us and say, "Oh my God, they're so cringy. These people, everyone claimed they were autistic when they were really normal." So what's the point of me making this video here? The point I'm getting at here is that if you are watching this and you think that you're neurodivergent, that you're autistic, you're probably not. You are probably a relatively normal person. And that's a good thing. It's good to be normal. You do not want to be neurodivergent because that sucks, okay? We are normal people. Most likely, you either just have a different brain chemistry from the average person, or maybe you just are a failed normie. Maybe you just didn't get the opportunities to properly socially develop for whatever reason.